I was living under the misconception, if I can just let go of these particular behaviors, then my problem will be gone and everything will be okay. That prayer was answered. I move into a new state of being where I'm given an opportunity to see something more subtle. I'm still actually caught in what I refer to as the frequency of addiction, because even though my main addictions, or what I thought were the real problem, are now gone, I guess that idea that when I let go of drugs and alcohol, everything will just be all right for me.
It's a part of our spiritual growth that what happens is, in the beginning, in our initial aha moments, our initial Satori moments, you come out of the desert, but you have a pebble in your shoe. You feel that pebble. Even though you're no longer walking in a lot of rocks, you feel the pebble and it feels so big. And it feels that I'm going backwards. But in fact, we're not going backwards. We just now can see more clearly there's other things to deal with. I was dealing with alcohol, kleptomania, whatever it was I was dealing with, that's gone. If somebody's wearing a nice clean suit and somebody drives by the street and splashes mud and water, you put the suit in the cleaners, you get it out, but there's a few spots there. You notice the spots. You don't notice that 90% of the suit is clean. You notice the spots that you couldn't see before. So in that same way, we get rid of the gross stuff, and then we notice stuff we didn't even notice before. But it seems big, but that's the blessing.
Welcome. I am your host, Tommy Rosen, and today I have the great pleasure and honor of connecting with Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith. He is the founder and CEO of Agape International Spiritual Center, a trans-denominational community in Los Angeles, comprised of thousands of local members and global live streamers. Highly regarded for its cultural, racial, and spiritual diversity and inclusivity, the late Coretta Scott King wrote to Dr. Beckwith, "I greatly admire what you are doing to bring about the beloved community," which is certainly what my dear husband worked for and ultimately gave his life. Dr. Beckwith is widely regarded for his teachings on the science of inner transformation and unity. He embraces a practical approach to spirituality, utilizing meditation, affirmative prayer, and life visioning, which is a spiritual technology he developed for conscious evolution, authentic living, and living your life's purpose. These practices teach us to take the experience of inner peace and awakened awareness into our everyday lives. He is a sought-after meditation teacher, conference speaker, and seminar leader on the life visioning process. He has addressed audiences at the UN General Assembly, TEDx, Maui, and Oprah Winfrey's Super Soul Sundays, among numerous others. 3 of his books, Life Visioning, Spiritual Liberation, and Transcendence Expanded, have received the prestigious Nautilus Award. And I really want to get a mention of his podcast in. His new podcast, Take Back Your Mind with Michael B. Beckwith, is available in all the places you would receive your podcasts. And I want to just say that it's an unbelievable pleasure for me to have spent a lot of time personally with Michael.
Brother Tommy, it is absolutely my joy to be with you. It's always an honor to hang out with you and all that you're bringing to the planet. I'm glad to be here.
Beautiful. So, Michael, I want to frame this a little bit. We've done 10 of these conferences before, and you have been involved with us in previous ones. This one here, we decided to really focus on this concept of life beyond addiction, bringing awareness to the challenges that people have in recovery from addiction, not just in addiction itself. Really starting to take a look at our society's emphasis on that, well, the first sort of days and weeks of a person's recovery, the way we emphasize it, we sort of front load treatment. And I think to a certain extent that we certainly haven't mastered, but we're not paying enough attention to the rest of someone's life as a person on a spiritual path of liberation, on a spiritual path of recovery. So I wanted just to begin there with this concept of life beyond addiction, understand your perspectives of addiction as you see it through the lens of your teachings, and then we can get into this conversation about, what is a life of a person, an approach of a person who wants to live a life beyond addiction. What might that look like?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Tommy. It's my joy to be with you. When we look at addiction, there's a yearning within all of us to have such a sublime connection with the absolute, the presence, and all that brings to us. And oftentimes individuals don't know they're really seeking that. And so they go for a temporary fix, temporary high, and whatever that addiction might be, whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex, shopping, heavy consumerism, uh, likes, whatever it is, they're getting dopamine hits from something outside of themselves. And then there's a temporary desire to keep getting those same kind of hits with diminishing returns as it goes on. So then there's more and more and more of that which doesn't satisfy, that the individual develops a habit around, and they become addicted. And so, as we know, the body temple, can produce more drugs than CVS. It's a dynamic inner pharmacy that can produce any drug that's necessary that matches whatever it is we're longing for and will mentally create. So whatever the addiction is, if we call it as addiction, that means that we're looking for exogenous, something outside of ourself that's going to satisfy only what the soul can satisfy, only what our higher self or what our becoming more of ourself can satisfy.
Mm.
So we talk about a life beyond addiction. We actually use the word liberation. We're actually liberating energy within us that's been coagulated around temporary fix. We're liberating that energy. Sometimes it's a wound, it's an unhealed area that we're seeking it to cover up by some kind of addictive behavior. And then that creates more and more of the condensation of we're less than. So we're seeking to liberate that energy so that we're more freeing ourselves to live a life in which we are always on a discovery of who we are, discovery of more of who we are, and setting that free. That's not addiction. That's a life in which we're living constantly discovering, uncovering, activating, and then ultimately expressing more of our hidden potential that's being activated. Now, many people, obviously, in our world, particularly in the Western world, the non-indigenous cultures, we're just inundated with so much that doesn't satisfy, promising to satisfy. So I call it nefarious hypnotism. People are just hypnotized into thinking that something's going to satisfy them, and so we're breaking even the addiction to the false promises that our society brings to us, and we instead find a path of liberation that ultimately allows us to not live a perfect life, whatever that fantasy is. We're all imperfect beings unfolding and allowing the perfection within us to unfold, but we live a different kind of life. The life is always now discovery, uncovering, activation, and expressing, not beating ourselves up when we fall down, but understanding that's a part of the process as well. And then, it becomes, in the beginning, it's a lifestyle, and ultimately it becomes a way of living. When it's temporary, it's a lifestyle. When it becomes permanently etched within us, that's just how we live our life, And I guess those would be my opening comments based on your question.
Yes, I love it so much. Reflecting on my own experience as a person moving along that path of discovery, I love that language that you used. I was living under the misconception while in active addiction that this is my problem. And if I can just let go of these particular behaviors, then my problem will be gone and everything will be okay. That prayer was answered. I move into a new state of being where now I've let go of those self-harming behaviors, and I'm given an opportunity to see something more subtle.
Yeah.
the more subtle thing is I'm still actually caught in what I refer to as the frequency of addiction, because even though my main addictions, or what I thought were the real problem, are now gone, I still am learning through my relationships, through my relationship to food, my relationship to this body, through all of these challenges around money and purpose. I'm still stuck in a certain way, in a certain force field that I have now woken up at that point to the idea that, well, I guess that idea that when I let go of drugs and alcohol, everything will just be all right for me. I'm not. I'm still suffering, and that's a little bit why we're here also. Could you speak to that more and more subtle realization as we move along?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is so profound and so beautiful. It's a part of our spiritual growth that what happens is in the beginning, in our initial aha moments, our initial satori moments, where we clean up, we do a lot of healing, and the gross things we do handle. However, the subtle stuff is there, as you indicate, but the feeling tone of the subtle stuff is that it's still gross. It's like you come out of the desert, but you have a pebble in your shoe. You feel that pebble. Even though you're no longer, walking in a lot of rocks, you feel the pebble and it feels so big. And so in terms of spiritual growth, development, and unfoldment, what happens is there's certain things we don't notice about ourselves because we have a lot of gross issues we're dealing with, that when those gross things are taken care of, so to speak, we now notice the other stuff. And it feels that, oh my God, I'm going backwards. But in fact, we're not going backwards. We just now can see more clearly there's other things to deal with, And so instead of self-flagellating, oh my God, now I have these things to deal with, it's like, no. I can now see these things about myself I never noticed before because I was dealing with drugs. I was dealing with alcohol. I was dealing with kleptomania. I was dealing with whatever it was I was dealing with. That's gone. Now I can see these other things. And I think that's just a part of the purification process. More and more subtle. It's like if somebody's wearing a nice clean suit and somebody drives by the street and splashes mud and water on the suit, the suit's dirty. You put the suit in the cleaners, you get it out, but there's a few spots there. You notice the spots. You don't notice that 90% of the suit is clean. You notice the spots that you couldn't see before. So in that same way, we get rid of the gross stuff, and then we notice stuff we didn't even notice before, but it seems big. But that's the blessing. We can now see it. But we don't define ourselves by that. We don't say, this is who I am. We say, this is the process of healing this particular area of my life. And whatever practice we use to move through the gross material, we continue that same practice to move through what appears to be now more subtle aspects of ourselves. Yeah.
I love it. I know that in your work and in your personal study and dedication to your own becoming and all the stuff that you're doing, I know that the power of words are so important for you, and you emphasize it all the time. And when I hear you at Agape or have heard you in India and places we've been together, there's always this exquisite attention to the meaning and the power behind words. And you just spoke just now to this idea of identifying with ourself at any particular stage of our development. So for example, in the beginning, the grosser part of addiction, I would raise my hand and say, well, my name's Tommy, I'm an addict, or I'm an alcoholic. At that point in time, I actually identified with that behavior. It was so close to me, and it seemed to serve a purpose at that moment. Now, recovery is evolutionary to me, or it's not recovery. And so as I moved along, I actually had a need for different words and different identifications moving along that would help me to understand myself more clearly in this unfoldment of my journey. Can you speak to words and identifications in this way?
Right. First of all, the word we speak carries frequency and vibration. it's like a spell we cast upon ourselves.
Hmm.
The words that we speak and the words that are in our awareness. Like if I were to say to someone, um, say to yourself right now, close your eyes and say, I am peaceful. And you hear yourself say, I am peaceful. Like you don't really hear that with your ears. What just heard, I am peaceful? That's your awareness that's hearing that. And so when we hear like a teacher like Jesus say, they have eyes but see not, and they have ears but hear not, he is saying that people are listening to their own thoughts and seeing their own thinking, but they're not seeing or hearing reality. And so all of that is in our awareness, and they become identified with what's going on in their awareness, opinions, points of view, perceptions, positionality, projections, all of that. And they can't see beyond what is going on in their mind, and they're only hearing what's happening in their mind. So individuals are blind. So when we begin to speak properly and not beat ourselves up, when we begin to have a more self-loving conversation about ourselves and others, because in truth, there's no other, we begin to have a greater conversation about ourselves and the so-called other, even the planet upon which we're living. And then that begins to filter in our awareness, and we begin to hear more self-loving conversation, even when we make a mistake. That begins to be subjectified. So it becomes a part of our subconscious, and then it becomes a part of our personal law of how we live our life, so that our very vibration changes. So if people were just to listen, they just listen to what's happening in their awareness, they will see, not with eyes, but they'll see with their awareness, either they're being blind to reality, or they're actually using the power of the word to actually open themselves up to reality. And of course, when I use the word reality with a capital R, we're talking about the absolute undifferentiated wholeness that's everywhere, of which people minimally see. And a lot of that is obscured by their conversation. You know, we learn how to monitor what we say about ourselves and what we say about other people. One of my teachers used to say, we learn to spiritually gossip about each other. So if we're going to talk about each other, it's spiritual gossip. You know, Tommy's really cool, man. You know, did you ever hear about Tommy Rosen? Oh man, he has this wonderful podcast. You know, he has incredible guests. You know, we learn to spiritually gossip about ourselves and about others until that becomes a dimension of our awareness. You know, it's a part of practice. You don't want to, I tell people, you don't want to say about anyone what you don't want to experience. You know, now that's, of course, there are exceptions to that rule. If somebody's a pedophile or somebody's about to do something crazy, you want to say, hey, you know, let's watch that individual. Don't let him, don't let him around your jewels or your kids, but there's always an exception to the rule. But pretty much, you don't want to say what you don't want to experience,
Yeah. Now there's a vibrational reality to words, as you've just expressed. There's a vibrational reality to this process of evolution. There's a vibrational reality to everything. And we began today, and you said there's this tremendous longing.
Yeah.
We have this tremendous longing. And you also said that most people may not realize that they have that. And they're seeking certain things in the external, trying to satisfy that longing. But they would argue with you, Michael. They would argue and say, no, I'm not interested at all. I'm not interested. I don't have a longing like that. I'm not interested in God. I'm not interested in spirit. I don't have that's just not where my mind's at, And I'm just wondering how to comment or how to sort of see that, because to me, there's a pattern. There's a pattern that we get stuck in. And so a big part of our work as spiritual teachers or as people seeking to be more awake is to break that pattern. And it's a difficult thing when you've been, brainwashed. I use that term very purposefully. People on retreat they're like, are you trying to brainwash us with your yoga? And I'm like, what? You don't think you've been brainwashed?
Right.
trying to help you out here.
Right.
You know, can you speak to that a bit?
The brainwashing piece or the
The breaking the pattern,
yeah.
and helping a person who may be coming with a bit of contempt or a bit of negativity, you know?
Yeah, well, first of all, a person may have a bad taste in their mouth about anything spiritual or religious. They're, like you just said, they may say, I'm not looking for anything spiritual. And so I often say, you don't have to use those words, but there is a longing for connection with love. There's a longing for the dynamic of peace in our life. There's a longing for a sense of beauty. You don't have to put that in a religious or spiritual context. Those are just non-dual qualities.
Mm.
And so of a person who's outside of any kind of spiritual domain is not going to argue about peace, love, beauty, intelligence. And a person that's in a kind of a spiritual domain is not going to deny the embracing of intelligence, love, and peace. So we're talking about the same thing, but describing it differently based on, if a person's been hurt by religion for some reason, we're still talking about the same thing, but we're not in that particular context. But generally speaking, when you talk about breaking the pattern, as you know, that generally comes when a person is sick and tired of being sick and tired, or there's a sudden insight or a revelation. A person may get in a strange attractor field. They may get in a field of somebody's vibrating really high, and then suddenly they become interested in being free. Or an individual has hit rock bottom, or they're just so sick and tired of living the life that they've been living that in that moment of darkness, they see a pinprick of light. And they want to change, but it doesn't matter how they come through the door, whether they're coming through on their knees of being sick and tired, or whether they've been startled by the light of someone else has cast upon them. It doesn't matter. Once that inner something, they become interested in it. And the word interest, the root word of interest out of the French means to love. Once there's real interest, then an individual's trajectory of their life changes. Because once there's interest, then things begin to move into place in the world of phenomena that brings the right people, the right books, the right circumstances based on their interests. If they're uninterested, you remember this statement, if a pickpocket sees the Buddha, all he sees is his pockets. Because that's all he's interested in. But once the Buddha is like shining bright, pickpocket can't even see it. He's just interested in the pockets. Oh, did you see the pockets on that guy? They're full of something. but once an individual is just a little bit interested, everything shifts in their life. They begin to meet the right person, or they accidentally show up at a meeting, or I can remember someone that got sober that was going to the beach, and they saw these people having a great time at the beach, sitting in a circle, and there were some pretty girls there, So they said, what was this meeting about? They sat down, and it was a sobriety meeting, and but they were interested in the girls. But when they sat there, something took over, and they realized, I've been an alcoholic for so many years, but there was an interest.
Yes.
That opened them up to the great possibility. Now that person is a spiritual teacher, But I hope I'm answering your question there.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love it all, and so valuable. I want to move into this piece about mental training, maybe mental mistraining, and the brainwash piece, and sort of, you're teaching. I know that you're a lover, I believe, of yoga in the purest sense of that term, that union, that coming together. A practitioner of meditation, and so a lot of the work that you do has to do with mind training. And I've said that we train ourselves into addiction, and we can train ourselves out. So I'd love to speak about that shift in the mind from a practical sense, a meditative sense.
The way I look at it is on a number of levels. One, we have a mind. We're not the mind, but we have it in that sense of the word. And the mind, as you indicated, has been brainwashed and programmed. And there are certain patterns and beliefs and perceptions that we didn't even put there. We've inherited from our Western society, Western religion. We've inherited from whatever schools we went to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's already like a groove that's cut. And so when we begin to wake up, we can program our own mind. It doesn't have to be programmed by the news media or by pseudo-patriotism or pseudo-nationalism or whatever the case may be. We can begin to take over and this beautiful instrument, which can begin to produce great results in our life. So once an individual realizes that most of the stuff they believe, they inherit it. They just inherit it from somewhere, and many of those thoughts and perceptions, they don't even know where it came from. They're just living in this perceptual reality, and then they had no examination. Where did this thought come from? Where did this belief come from? I remember I was watching I think it was a 60 Minutes program a few years ago, and there was this man whose father, grandfather, and great-grandfather were all like grand wizards of the Ku Klux Klan. And so he was just in it. That was his life as a little boy. And he had a little son, and he was watching television one day, and his son came by and turned off the television in the middle of his program. And he said, "Why'd you do that?" He said, "Well, there was a black man on the program. You can't watch that." And it woke him up. He said, "What?" And he realized that he had been programmed from his great-grandfather's grandfather and his dad into this perception of racial superiority over gay people, black people, Latino people, etc. And he never thought that this was something wrong with that until his son was being integrated into the same thought. It just woke him up. Where did I get this thinking? Subsequently, he changed drastically and tried to retrain his son. His wife got custody of the kid and said that he had temporarily lost his mind because he had broken free from the Ku Klux Klan. And it took him a period of time to basically get custody of his son, blah, blah, blah. But the point being, he had never examined those thoughts until his son woke him up. Now, that's an extreme case. But how many thoughts and perceptions and beliefs are we carrying that we had nothing to do with? Or we look at things in the past that we would say, how did that happen? How did people treat people like that back in the past? How did people do that to the planet? How did people do, what thoughts are we carrying now that we'll say 50 years from now, we actually lived that way?
Right.
Where do we hold it? We need to ask ourselves that from time to time.
Yes.
What am I carrying now that I may look upon as Neanderthal 20 or 30 years from now, so that we're constantly in our meditation, in our prayer work, our study, examining ourselves to see if what we're carrying is universally true. Is it going to be true 100 years from now? Or is it just an opinion? Is it just a philosophy? Is it just somebody else's point of view? So it's a constant clearing. And so obviously meditation, true meditation, is a way by which we are constantly clearing our consciousness, where it clears the static from our awareness. It clears the debris. It allows for the rising up of that which no longer serves us to be evacuated from our consciousness. So there's a constant change, and sometimes the worst days in our life are the best days of our life because there's a total letting go of something that we didn't even know we even had at the time. It's an amazing self-therapy meditation. Yeah.
It's a gift. It's an absolute gift to oneself.
Right.
I'm thinking of it these days as kind of a personal responsibility.
Yeah, it's an inner shower and a bath we have to take on a regular basis. No one's going to leave their house without showering, brushing their teeth, and doing all the proper, what I call social contracts. And we just want to elevate our social contract so we're not going out into the public without an inner cleansing, or at least an inner reconnection. If you want to call it the divine, you want to call it your real self, whatever you want to call it, You don't really want to go out into the world dirty inside.
Hmm.
You know?
Do you hold to the teaching and the proposition that our mental reality is a creative entity of the external?
Oh, absolutely. As within, so without that, our thoughts are units of mental energy. And energy is always in a process of transmutation. So just like water can become ice, can become gas, it transmutes itself without destroying itself. Our thoughts do the same thing. Our thoughts become speech, behavior, perception, and experience. So whatever your chronic thinking is, it will eventually transmute itself into a condition, a vibrational condition of the body temple, where you may produce greater health, or you may produce a condition for discomfort or pain or dis-ease or premature aging or whatever the case may be. Or you may create a perception of separation that may block your entrepreneurship or your creativity or your prosperity. So it's a constant transmutation of the thoughts. Now, I separate thinking from mentation. Mentation are the thoughts that happen every single day. You know, they just kind of cycle and recycle themselves. It's not real thinking. Real thinking is more conscious.
Mentation.
Mentation.
Yes, thank you. Mhm.
Yeah, mentation is the reoccurring thoughts that just happen, you know? And then there's real thinking. When you wake up and you meditate or you pray or you study, and then you begin to think consciously around a certain conscious way, or there's also a Japanese word. The Japanese word is kamkuru, which is the word for thinking, and the actual meaning is to return to the realm of God. So when you combine thinking in the English language, which is more creativity, and with kamkuru, which is returning to the realm of God, real thinking is returning to the realm of creativity, where inspiration takes over. That's real thinking. What most people call thinking is just the rehashing of the thoughts they had the day before.
Mhm.
It's this mental garbage going on and on and on and on. And
Mhm.
people need to learn, you know, we sometimes call ourselves a new thought, ageless wisdom teaching. You need to have a new thought every now and then, a moment of inspiration. And that comes from a meditation, I believe.
Yes. Do you feel the need for meditation is a universal need? Does
Oh,
anyone get away? Did anyone get away from this?
no, you know, whatever you want to call it, you can call it mindfulness, you can call it meditation, you can call it inner revelry. Sometimes your great artists will go into a kind of a spontaneous moments of meditation and catch inspiration. You know, people can hit the zone in different areas, but I think as society matures, and you look at it now, we talk about meditation today. 30, 40 years ago, it was a kind of a woo-woo statement. You
Yes.
know, "Ooh, those people are sitting there with their eyes closed. What are they doing?" You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Do something.
Yeah, don't just sit there, do something. And now we say, don't just do something, sit there first. You know, but now we have the science that actually corroborates what happens to your brain function
Hmm.
and your brain waves when you actually sit with an intention and attentiveness. It's now proven that, you know, there's a coherence around the brain, and there's a function of the different activities of the brain that become coherent. Now, you know, things that have been taught by mystics for thousands of years now have the science. Science is no longer divorced from spirituality. Back in the Middle Ages, they got a divorce, but now they're remarried.
Hmm.
You know, so you can actually see scientifically what happens when your brain is on meditation. Yeah,
Hmm. Well, thank God. Thank God for that rekindling of that relationship, because it's been painful without it.
absolutely.
And I would say my
Trying to prove
job,
something you can't see.
yes, very difficult thing to put metrics on.
Yeah.
You know, I want to speak about division. I want to speak about conflict now, because we've been so in it right now, and I'm thinking right this moment of a conversation I've had recently with a friend of mine who I'll just use this as an example, is just really caught in these these protests and the what's becoming violent protests on the campus of Columbia University in New York
And
City,
UCLA and other places.
UCLA and everywhere.
UCLA just broke out in violence yesterday.
Yes, yes, and so there's this the thing that we're focusing on. Well, one of the things is so Israel, Palestinian people, Gaza, the Hamas, the reaction of the Israeli government, all these things, and so there's a tremendous gravity around wanting, from my friend, about wanting me to get involved. And so his exact words are, "You should be outraged." Now I'm outraged in the sense of I wish for peace and I wish for people to come together and I wish for the end of this kind of suffering. But for me to be in an outraged state is not a good idea for me. It's not a good strategy for me to become outraged. To become effective might be a good strategy, and I have to figure out how to show up in this world, but not be too drawn down into conflict and confusion and the division that takes place around this or any other major issue that we've been facing. I would love to hear your thoughts about navigating these divisions, these positionalities between different groups.
Absolutely. I'll share with you to get into that. Years ago, right before I had a spiritual awakening, I was the propaganda commissioner for a very activist group in the United States to change the world by any means necessary. I was sitting in a meeting, and we were strategizing how best we were going to. It was a lot of revolutionary zeal. And someone behind me said, "If you were to take over the world tomorrow, would the world be any different? Would the world be any better?" So I looked, and there was nobody standing there. But I knew I heard it. So the meeting went on, and I heard the voice again. This time it was coming from within me. If you were to take over the world tomorrow, talking about this group I was a part of, would the world be any better? And I looked around the room, and I could see the pathology in everyone in the room. This person had territorial issues. This person always had to be right. This person had a lot of jealousy. This person had some inner violence. I mean, I could see it. And I said, regardless of our ideology, the world wasn't going to be any different. So I left that meeting, never went back. I didn't have anything to replace it yet. And the very next week at that meeting, somebody shot somebody in that meeting. They got into an argument, guy pulled out a gun and shot somebody. But I wasn't there to be a part of that whole legal thing that went down. So right after that enrolled, I just transferred from Morehouse College, and where I founded the Harriet Tubman Prison Committee to fight for prisoners' rights and the right to be paid for the work they were doing. And I enrolled in USC as a psychobiology major. Thought I was gonna go to med school at the time. And that's when I began to have a series of inner experiences that ultimately catapulted me into this wide awareness where I died and I could see this universal presence of love and beauty everywhere. I could never get back in the box. So being a part of a revolutionary group of which we were going to change the world, I became aware that it was not going to happen without a change of consciousness. It is impossible. So it doesn't mean not to be active in the world. But as you were saying, you can't enter into building the beloved community without carrying the vibration of the beloved community. That is an impossibility, you see. So when we look at all the things that are going on in the world, you can actually see people mesmerized by their side being right. And so the choice is always, am I going to be real or am I going to be right? When I talk about real, that means am I vibrating in the frequency of love and peace and harmony and non-duality, or am I vibrating in my side is right? If I'm vibrating with my side being right, and I can have all the statistics while I'm right, all of that, then I am doing harm to the birth of what's trying to emerge. But what's trying to emerge on a round planet are no sides. what's trying to emerge is that which is beautiful for all parties. And if an individual is only interested in their own kin and their own, quote unquote, their own people, then they are missing the rest of the population. And they are a hindrance to the beloved community being born, you see. And so that's tough. But when you go inside and crack that sense of separation, you never see life the same ever again. I remember one time traveling to Tacoma, Washington to speak. And when I got off of the plane, I was in this altered state. It was the real state. I didn't know I was in this state, but I actually believed that I knew every single being at the airport. And I'm walking around trying to hug people in the elevator and everything. And this guy named Bill was saying, Michael, stop. You're having an experience. You don't know these people. And I suddenly became aware that I was in expanded space, but there was no separation between all of these beings. Now, I've been in that state many times, but I remember this was quite profound. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. There aren't no your people. Doesn't exist. It does not exist at all. So when you see people being hypnotized into these very limited points of view, and these little boys militarized, whatever side it is, militarized and brainwashed, there's the enemy. They are brainwashed, and they have limited their perception to such a small point of view. They will ultimately experience how they make other people feel, you see. And so with you, like you, I see what's going on, and then I see at another level what's trying to emerge, and I seek to be at that level and bring that into manifestation. And I'm not saying it's easy. It is difficult, particularly when there's high emotions going crazy, but I see our little brothers and sisters, and I call them little brothers and sisters, that live in the field of anger, live in the field of separation, live in the field of small self-righteousness, that are just adding fuel to the fire and don't know it. Yeah.
In previous language, I would have said the battle has to be won at the level of consciousness. The new language would be the peace can be realized at the level of consciousness.
Absolutely. I've seen so many lives change for the better who were caught up in things of that particular nature, that I live in the realm of possibility and spiritual optimism, not hiding my head in this ground, pretending there aren't any issues, but knowing there's a solution to every issue. And, there's so many underlying things that are promoting violence and promoting separation. People don't understand the manipulation. The many people are just being, citizens are just being manipulated around the world by governments. Now people have to realize that generally speaking, governments are not for the betterment of the people. I can't really think of any governments that are, that people generally have to wake up and lead governments, or else governments are just going to lead us to more war and destruction and separation. Governments like to say, I'm number one. Governments never say, I am one with the one. They don't do that. They're generally high egotistical individuals that are in positions of pseudo power. And they basically try to maintain that power at all means necessary, regardless of what party it is. And they hypnotize people in so many different ways through propaganda. People don't even know they're being propagandized. They have no idea they're being propagandized.
Yes.
And they just fall lockstep into it. So what we're seeking to do is being vibrational tuning forks of the beloved community. So that when people come into our communities, into our workshops, into our spaces, they actually can come into oh, wow, this is a breath of fresh air. Now we can get back into the fray, but we're in it, but we're of the answer. And that takes work.
Yes. Well, it turns out that living a life beyond addiction, especially when we're so under the influence of so many different forces, that it takes work.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the rub for a lot of people as well. It's easier not to do that. And actually, it's not easier. The consequences are so brutal, and
Yes.
you just have to look out your window and see what they are.
Yes.
But I think that's part of the issue as we are with this conference. We're working on, inspiration. Please
Yes.
please take these actions, move in this direction. Consider the things we're saying so that whatever work is necessary for us to collectively awaken with one another, that you'll be inspired to do it.
Yeah. Tommy, what I've seen, I do a lot of work on the other side, and I have seen people that are at odds with each other,
Mm,
but then I've actually seen them on the other side, like totally in love. I've seen like their higher selves, like laughing at their um, uh, avatars here on the planet.
uh-huh.
Their human part, like they hate each other for whatever reason, and then on another level, they're like so in love, And so the idea is when we're meditating, what's actually happening is that every insight we have is actually our higher self seeping into this reality as an aha, a satori moment, an insight. And through spiritual practice, it becomes integrated and we become lovers because that's our real nature. You see, it's not a foreign invasion, some God out there coming. It's actually our real self dripping through spiritual practice.
Mm,
It becomes almost impossible to hate, you
mm.
see. Yeah.
If you don't mind, we're unfortunately coming to the top of the hour here, but I
Really?
just,
See, like 5 minutes.
I know, it's how I feel. Maybe we can do a marathon session sometime in the next year or so. But for right now, for our purposes here, I really would love to hear you speak about agape. To me, that is it is a force of unity, and a force of elevation and upliftment, and just so much love there. And I know there's so many people that may be watching this that don't know what it is, and I'd love you to just speak to that vision and that thing that's happened and happening regularly.
Absolutely. The Agape International Spiritual Center is a spiritual home for people of all faiths, all religious background. It's very diverse and very inclusive. And we teach the universal spiritual principles that are found in every spiritual path with heart. And there's a big emphasis on spiritual practice. Meditation is our foundation piece. Affirmative prayer, life visioning, sacred service, law of circulation. These are all practices. So we often call agape a healing field where people come in and begin to heal their woundedness of separation, whatever that wound is. And then it's a vision field where people catch the vision for their life. Why did they take an incarnation? Why are they here? It's not just to buy a bunch of stuff that's going to end up in the landfill when you die. It's actually you're here for a greater purpose. And then it's a field of birthing,
Hmm.
where you actually birth the vision with a support of the community. And so it's a place of high inspiration, sacred service, many different ministries where people can just jump in. We have a university where people take classes to actually learn these spiritual principles and practice them. There's pathways to being a licensed spiritual therapist, licensed spiritual leader, minister, etc. But we're in our 38th year.
Hmm.
And it's amazing to me that I've done something this long.
Incredible. And could you extend an invite to those who might be visiting the Los Angeles area?
If you're in the LA area or LA adjacent, just come on. We say come on up to Agape. We don't say come down to Agape. We say come up to Agape. Come up to the high frequency. You can go to agapelive.com to get all the details. We're presently meeting at the Saban Theater right there on Wilshire Boulevard, just east of La Cienega.
Hmm.
Have 3 services. The Way of Meditation service begins at 7:45 a.m. And then there's another service at 9 a.m., another service at 11:30, preceded by a meditation service. Meditations at 11, meditations at 8:30. Meditation is always involved in anything that we do. And most people come to the 11:30, they come to the 11 a.m. meditation and the 11:30 worship service. That's where most of the people come to. We don't turn you away if you come to the 9 o'clock service, but we promote the 11 o'clock service. So you can, so Agape is I love the community. It's everybody's there. I mean, the demographics. You walk through the hallway and you'll hear all kinds of different languages from different parts of the world. It's a beautiful place. I love it.
It's a beautiful, powerful place, and I'm so delighted that it exists.
We have people that fly in just to come to Agape from all around the world. I was in Denver one time and I saw this lady that I was familiar with. I was speaking in Denver and I said, "Oh, you came to hear me?" She said, "Yes, but I live here in Denver." I said, "But I see you at Agape." She said, "Yeah, I fly in every Saturday night. I come Sunday and fly back home." I said, "You do what?" And I meet a lot of people like that fly in and become a part of the community that way. But you don't have to fly in. You can just live stream it at agapelive.com or our YouTube channel or our Facebook channel. And as you indicated, I have the Take Back Your Mind podcast, and I have inspiration every day on my Instagram page.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michael, so much. I'm just I'm humbled and grateful as always to connect with you. And we've been finishing these talks, each of these talks with a little Recovery 2.0 prayer.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
And I'd like to ask if we could do that now. If everybody here today, if you just sit up nice and tall and bring the palms together at the heart and allow the eyes gently to close down, and we share this inner space together. We share this heart space together. We'll take a inhale together as a community. And we exhale together. And I'll recite these just few words. If you know it, you can recite along with me. And if not, we'll just be here in the energy together. Great Spirit, put us in the places you want us to be, with the people you want us to be with, and doing the things you want us to do. Thank you for the joys and the challenges of our lives. Amen, Sat Nam, and Namaste.